Hello, Kirinari again. How are we this winter? I know I'm supposed to be hibernating, but the green... Well, we'll get into that in a minute. First of all, and boy have we got a doozy for you today. And a cage match at the White House, huh? Because nothing says freedom, democracy, peace, love and tolerance like two meatheads beating the shit out of each other. And there's Trump, front row seat, and screaming fans behind him. Jets roaring overhead. And he falls asleep. And sleepy Joe Biden. Well, we got sleepy Donald too. There we go. How about that? Next topic. An important one. Because we got a time limit for it too, don't we? In more ways than one. Let's see. The Greens and Labor are talking about cutting the NDIS now, aren't they? Ooh. I mean, they've done some good work with, the housing thing, yeah. And so have my comrades. I'll get into that in a minute too. But, basically, today we're going to be talking about what's happening with the NDIS. I mean, we got 7.5 weeks now, don't we? Till they think about cutting the NDIS. And that affects everybody here, doesn't it? It affects me, it affects you, it affects the advocates, and it affects the board. It affects everybody standing here. So let's get into it, huh? And my comrades have a paper on disability. Let's see, disability is a class issue. Disabled people aren't separate from the working class, they're part of it. They're people in paid jobs, injured workers, carers, people pushed in and out of work by pain, fatigue or mental health. Even those who have never worked and may never work still live by the rules of capitalism. Find the money to pay the bills or go under. Capitalism systematically punishes disabled people for existing. It drives bosses and governments to see some people as quote-unquote useful and others as disposable. This is because capitalism runs on profit, not on human need. The boss's idea of quote-unquote normal. Bosses want workers who can show up when they're rostered and keep up the pace. We need to be able to take stress without breaking, follow orders, and keep going even when we're in pain. To the bosses, this is a quote-unquote normal worker. Someone ready, reliable, and always available. The idea of quote-unquote normal isn't neutral. It's used against all of us. It makes the boss's expectations look like common sense. Anyone who can't keep up gets treated as a quote-unquote problem. Too unpredictable, too slow, too expensive. This is because capitalism hates paying for anything it can't profit from. Disabled kids are treated as quote-unquote burdens. Those who can't be easily slotted into the workforce become a quote-unquote budget issue. Disabled people and their families are forced to fight for the basics. Transport, schooling, support at home. The result is that families, but mostly women, are expected to do the unpaid or underpaid work that keep people alive and offer basic dignity. But what's disability to a millionaire? Disability isn't just a medical condition or an identity. Class is crucial to how disability is experienced. The same health problem looks very different if you're rich or poor. A CEO with chronic pain doesn't face eviction for missing a few days of work. A landlord with depression doesn't lose access to food because they can't do long shifts. If they need a day off, the rent still comes in. The shares still pay out. Being in the ruling class buys insulation. Any challenges can be met with private healthcare, paid help at home, personal transport, and most importantly, the freedom to rest. What we understand as disability under capitalism has a class character. It's what happens when health problems collide with the compulsion to work for a wage and pay for basic necessities. You know, the barcode being a symbol of oppression and all that. Workers with disabilities who can't work or who lose a job risk losing everything. The same injury that's an annoying quote-unquote challenge for a boss can be a full-blown crisis for a worker. And it's not that capitalism just quote-unquote forgets to include disabled people. It produces disability. Manual labour wrecks bodies. Care work burns people out. Hospitality and retail grind people down emotionally. And I can attest to that one. I worked on the checkouts at Woolworths. I can tell you right now, that really does grind you the fuck down emotionally. Poverty and housing insecurity disable people too. Cheap food, bad sleep, mouldy rentals, and constant stress over bills takes its toll. Capitalism breaks us down, then blames us for not coping. Ha! What a bunch of bullshit. Or actually, I'm not saying that they're full of shit. I'm saying that, capitalism. Yeah, I think you understand what I'm saying. But we can't have some of you in there try to twist my words. That's all. Yeah. Disability and discipline. The oppression of disabled people doesn't just hurt those with disabilities. It keeps the whole working class in line. Disabled people who aren't working are used as a political punching bag. Politicians and the media, fucking media, talk about quote-unquote bludgers, quote-unquote rorters, and quote-unquote welfare cheats to justify lower payments and more hoops to jump through. Disabled people are shamed for trying to survive, and it scares everyone else. The message is simple. Don't complain. Don't slow down. Don't refuse overtime. One injury, breakdown, or diagnosis, and you could end up begging for a payment that doesn't cover rent. Disability becomes the shadow hanging over every worker, and most of us will experience it at some point, whether through old age or a family member. And that's why solidarity with disabled people is not charity. It's self-defense. When governments cut payments, attack quote-unquote benefit cheats, or make the NDIS and other supports impossible to access, they're not just targeting a minority. They're tightening the screws on everyone by making the alternative to exploitation even worse. Power, not pity. Disability is a class issue. The idea that disabled people never work, or that those who can't are outside the working class, is wrong. Class power can be built by and with disabled workers, including those who are unemployed. But this can't just look like quote-unquote being nicer, while everything else stays the same. Real class power means fighting together to change the conditions that create disability and punish it. And it has to be revolutionary too. The world we need is one where impairments aren't barriers to a free and full life. Practical solidarity looks like backing a workmate who slows the job down for safety, not telling them to quote-unquote toughen up. Solidarity is refusing to let management isolate someone who gets injured or sick. It means pushing unions to fight for higher wages, shorter hours, and real sick leave, so people don't have to wreck themselves to keep a roof over their head. It takes fighting against cuts to the NDIS, job seeker, and the disability support pension, even if you're not on them yourself. And it starts by challenging the divisive language of quote-unquote bludgers and quote-unquote rorters. Every win that makes life safer and more secure for disabled people gives the rest of the working class more breathing room. It strengthens all of us in the struggle for a world based on meeting needs, not making profits. Under capitalism, disability is treated as failure. In a free society, it would simply be part of being human. And if that's not inspiring enough, there we go. We got the Spanish Revolution, 90 years on. Picket line. To some, our vision of anarchist communism sounds crazy. Even if they agree with our criticisms of capitalism, or think that communism sounds nice in theory, they just can't imagine it working in practice. Workers running society, no bosses or politicians, no poverty, no need to force people to do the difficult jobs. It just doesn't sound possible, it doesn't sound plausible. Look at Russia and China. That's how communism always turns out. Well, yes, if you think we'll get there by giving power to a government. But as anarchists, we don't look to the state to create socialism, we look to our fellow workers. How do we know? Because 90 years ago, the workers and peasants of Spain rose up against a fascist military coup, and they built it. The Spanish anarchists. The Spanish Revolution didn't come from nowhere. It was a result of decades of working class organisation. Anarchism was a major force in Spain because it was at the heart of the labour movement. It was the anarchists who, in 1910, formed the most important union federation in the country, the CNT. By 1936, it had almost 800,000 members and enormous power. The CNT was controlled from below by its members. Decisions were made by mass meetings of workers in their workplaces and through democratic delegate structures. The movement had its own newspapers, clubs, armed groups, and even its own schools. The workers rejected arbitration and backroom negotiations. Their weapon was industrial action, even if walking off the job meant breaking the law. And members didn't just strike over workplace issues. They knew that strikes were more powerful than elections or protests. Class power meant political power, and could be used to fight things like military conscription and, best of all, rising rents. And hey, we're getting housing prices down. How good is that? And like I said, we'll talk about my comrades' successes in regards to housing in a minute. But, you know, credit where credit's due. The Greens and Labor did well on that. July 17 to 18. All of this terrified the ruling class. In response, the Spanish military, led by General Francisco Franco, launched an uprising that crushed the workers' movement. The coup was backed by the bosses, the landowners, the Catholic Church, and various far-right political groups, aka the worst groups of society, in my opinion at least. The next day, workers launched a general strike, and the CNT took the lead in distributing arms. By acting quickly, they defeated the military in most major cities. But they didn't stop at putting down the coup. Roughly 2 million workers kicked out their bosses and took control of the economy. Badasses. Mansions were turned into communal dining halls, schools, warehouses, and free medical centres. Thousands of useless capitalist jobs were abolished. Unemployed workers helped share the workload in necessary industries. In some cases, this meant the workday could be shortened. Anarchy in industry. So what did anarchist communism look like in practice? Inefficient or unsafe workshops were closed. Workers came together in large, comfortable facilities to pool resources and make decisions together. Tram workers modernised the network with new safety and signalling systems. They installed showers and sanitation areas in their sheds for the first time. Entire routes were rebuilt in the interest of drivers and passengers. 100 new tram cars were put in use, leading to an increase of 50 million trips in 1 year. I mean, everyone likes to go on about how Mussolini kept the trains running on time. The only way Mussolini kept the trains running on time was because he made it a crime to report on delays. Then the more you know. Gas, water and energy workers started eliminating costs for consumers. They produced 10,000 extra cubic metres of clean drinking water. The electrical grid was rationalised. Well, I think they meant to say nationalised there, but yeah, anyway. And new power station construction, boosting output by over 50,000 kilowatts, enough to power tens of thousands of homes. Imagine what we could do with renewable energy. Power of the sun. Yeah. Healthcare workers united in a single industrial council, extending coverage to the most remote areas. In Barcelona alone, workers built 6 new hospitals and dozens of other clinics, offering free surgery and dental treatment. Women's healthcare was greatly expanded too. Gynecological treatment, birth control and abortion became widely available for the first time. Anarchy in agriculture. The revolution extended to the countryside as well. Rural workers took over 5.5 million hectares of land. 1,800 collectives were established, involving 800,000 farm workers and their families. Around 3 million people in total. In some collectives, output increased by between 30 to 50%. Some villages paid a guaranteed family salary, regardless of employment. Others abolished money entirely, using ration booklets to fairly distribute goods. Work no longer dictated a person's ability to live. Where there was abundance, goods were free. Where there wasn't, they were divided based on need. Or if it works so well, where is it? In 1939, Franco's army won and established a dictatorship. When he died, Spain transitioned back to an ordinary parliamentary system. But the Spanish Revolution wasn't defeated because quote-unquote communism doesn't work. It was destroyed by international isolation and counter-revolutionary politics. The moderate socialists opposed revolution, and capitalists around the world preferred fascism to anarchism. This scared CNT leaders into convincing workers to stop the revolution halfway, leaving some power in the hands of the old capitalists in government. Meanwhile, the liberals and the Stalinists sabotaged the revolution. They centralised control, arrested and murdered anarchists, and then lost the war after taking power. Yeah, take it out on a bunch of peaceful people and then go and lose a war, you shit cunts. Just like you did with Iran. Anyway, the anarchists had been well organised industrially, but they needed better political organisation to keep the movement on a revolutionary path. They also needed to support anti-colonial struggles in Morocco, where Franco was getting troops. Still, 90 years... That's just my opinion, but that's not the opinion of my comrades. That's just my opinion. Still, 90 years on, the Spanish Revolution... Support anti-colonial struggle where Franco was getting troops. Still, 90 years on, the Spanish Revolution stands as one of the most inspiring moments in history. It's proof that workers can run society without bosses or government control. The real lesson is that next time, we can't stop halfway. Now you might be thinking, well, I could vote in Pauline Hanson. Queen Boganella, as I like to call her. I mean, yeah, you could undo all that hard work that Labor and the Greens did to making housing affordable, just to spite us anarchists, who are at the media. Well, anyway, but you're not that petty, are you, Kieran Ori? I mean, Lib Better probably is, but I don't think you are, at least as far as I know. Anyway, I've got Pauline Hanson's voting record here, but quickly before we go into this, and this is the last topic for today because we're going on a bit, and I've got to say some battery for, what do you call it? NAIDOC week. I'll see you then too. Aboriginal history, Aboriginal politics, and the Aboriginal, just general Aboriginal knowledge. Good stuff. Get excited. But okay. Anyway, our comrades down in Melbourne just recently unionised a bunch of tenants who wanted security cameras in their block of flats. They created their own little union, and they kept asking Homes Victoria to put in security cameras because there was a bunch of crime happening in these flats. Well, my comrades managed to unionise, and they demanded that the tenant, and they got all these excuses saying we can't afford security cameras, all that bullshit. Yeah, the government's got a government. But we won. Long story short, we won. We demanded security cameras in those names, and we got them. I mean, granted, I've got to warn them that this isn't some sort of thing to lull them into a false sense of security, so that they can bait and switch my comrades later. But that's between me and my comrades now, isn't it? Okay. And finally, Pauline Hanson's voting record here, and especially this part of the voting record. Oh, theyvoteforyou.com. Any politician you want. Pauline Hanson. How Pauline Hanson so agrees that the federal government should take national action to increase housing affordability so that all Australians have the chance to buy their own home. So, 26th of November 2024 at 1:20pm in the Senate. Help to Buy Bill 2023. Help to Buy Consequential Provisions Bill 2023. Third reading passed the bill. Pauline Hanson voted no. Supporter would have voted yes. Matters of urgency. Housing address root causes of unaffordability. That's 6th of December 2023 at 6:16pm in the Senate. Pauline Hanson voted absent. Supporter would have voted yes. Housing Australia Future Fund Bill 2023. Third reading passed the bill. Pauline Hanson voted absent. Supporter would have voted yes. Housing Australia Future... that one was 13th September 2023 at 12:22pm in the Senate. I've got to really read these dates out. 13th of September 2023, 10:55am in the Senate. Housing Australia Future Fund Bill 2023 and two others. Second reading, agree with Bill's main idea. Pauline Hanson voted no. Supporter would have voted yes. And because of this, I haven't got the full date here because of this, staple. But anyway, COVID-19, housing and renters' rights. Pauline Hanson voted absent. Supporter would have voted yes. 11th of October 2016 at 4pm in the Senate. Motions, housing affordability, negative gearing and capital gains tax discount. Pauline Hanson voted no. Supporter would have voted yes. Here's some other interesting things she voted for. She voted for increasing surveillance powers on the Australian public. That's on her voting record, black and white. But she's not a tyrant, is she? I'm not going to let some racist, moronic fish and chip shop owner, who didn't finish high school for that matter, I did. I finished high school. I'm not going to let some racist, moronic fish and chip shop owner successfully dictate to me what is and is not Australian. Fuck her. And not in a good way. And here's another article you might be interested in. I'm not going to read it out because, it's cold and I want to go somewhere warm. But a critical assessment of GDP as a measure of economic performance and social progress, and gross domestic product, it was never intended to be a measure of well-being or progress. We've managed to twist that around, haven't we? Anyway, until next time, Kieran Ori. Same brunette hair, same back channel. All power to the people. No gods, no leaders, no masters.